Moms truly are special. A few months ago, I don't know how long ago it was, but Rick had given me our sermon schedule. He always gives me the titles and Bible references. Oh yes, children may be dismissed for junior church now. Thanks for hanging around. So Rick had given me the preaching schedule, and I noticed that he had me scheduled to preach on Mother's Day. And, you know, that's fine, not a big deal. But I kind of was thinking about it, and I thought, I have never, and I've been in ministry for over 20 years now, and I've never preached a Mother's Day sermon. And so I was like, well, this will be fun. This is cool, holiday. And then I was quickly very, very overwhelmed. Just a daunting task, and I'll get there. I'll get there in a minute. But as I was thinking about Mother's Day and just celebrating women, I got to thinking about. I just had this kind of a revelation, I guess you would say. It was kind of just a neat idea that, you know, God has, in God's perfect wisdom, He's designed this world with a masculinity and a femininity. And He's created men different than He created women. And I know, you know, men and women, you know, men can vary to their degrees of masculinity, and women vary to their degrees of femininity. But generally speaking, there's just kind of a masculine sense and a feminine sense. And I had this kind of revelation, I guess you would say. But if I show you this image, you know, a guy will look at that and they will think that is a human face. That's I can tell that that's a pixelated image of a human being, probably a male. It's probably most likely that's a guy. And we have this kind of understanding of what that is. We can make sense out of that, you know, but don't quite see it exactly clearly. Women will look at this and see it in crystal clear, high definition. And the illustration that I want to share here is I think that when, you know, there are some things that guys get, we understand, we can make sense out of it, but we just don't see it with the crystal clarity that women see things, and vice versa. I think the same could be said, that there are some things that women kind of understand about guys, but maybe don't see them quite as crystal clear as guys do. And I think that that's just a beautiful thing, that there's kind of a way that guys see things and a way that girls see things. And there's some overlap there, but there's some differences. And that's what we want to celebrate today is the woman, the femininity, and the mothers. So here's what was so overwhelming to me. I thought, great, we'll talk about moms and we'll talk about how great they are. That's how hard could that be, right? And then I started thinking about how great they are. And I thought, where do you start? I mean, there is so much I could share about mothers and about women that I was like, I'm scared. I don't know where to start. Here are some things that I came up with. These are any number of the things I could preach on this morning. We could talk about a woman's spiritual qualities. We could talk about her faithfulness, how prayerful she is, and how biblically grounded she is, and how grace-filled she is, and that she has a servant's heart. We could talk about her emotional qualities. We could talk about her being compassionate and patient and loving and encouraging and gentle. We could talk about her mental and relational qualities and how she's wise and discerning and strong-willed and supportive and trustworthy. We could talk about her practical qualities, how she's a hardworking woman, she's resourceful, she's well-organized, she's sacrificial, and she's consistent. We could talk about her teaching and her leadership qualities. We could talk about how she's an instructor and a mentor and a protector and a nurturer and a disciplinarian. Or we could talk about the creative and playful qualities of a woman, how she's fun-loving and she's a good storyteller and she's adventurous and she's artistic and she's got a good sense of humor. And I thought, uh-oh, where do you start? And so I decided this morning that I would just say, women are awesome. And we'll just close in prayer. That's really what I want to do. That's really what I want to do. I was thinking about all these qualities of a woman, and I mean, I was so overwhelmed, and it's kind of reflecting on all of these things. And as I did, there was one term that kind of rose to the surface for me that didn't cover everything, but it covered a lot of those qualities. As I thought about how awesome women are, the word that came to my mind was that they're nurturing. And a lot of those qualities that were listed are qualities of a nurturing mother. And so I want to talk about that a little bit this morning. And in doing so, I would like us to look at the life of Moses. So we're going to dive into Exodus in chapter 2. But before we do, I just want to skip forward because there's one tiny quick bit of information I would like us to see. And that's in Exodus chapter 6, verse 20. We read this. 4 chapters later, it says, Amram married his father's sister, Jochebed, who bore him Aaron and Moses. I just point this out because this tells us who Moses' parents were, Amram and Jochebed. Jochebed is his mother. So now let's go back. We're going to go back to Exodus chapter 2. But before we do, I just want to lay some groundwork. I want to give you a context for this passage we're about to look at. And so here's the setting. The Hebrews, as a nation, are all slaves to the Egyptians. Okay? And they're being hard pressed. They're being worked really hard. The Egyptians are trying their best to keep the Hebrews under their thumb, keep them under their power as their slaves. But the Hebrews are growing in number. They're working hard, and they're growing as a nation. And at some point, the Pharaoh realizes all the Hebrews would have to do is partner with one of these surrounding nations, and we would be outnumbered. And that would be a big problem for us. So we have to do something about these Hebrews and them growing as a nation. We have to put an end to it. And so the Pharaoh has a plan. He pulls some of the Hebrew midwives aside and he says, listen, when the women call you to help them deliver babies, if it's a female baby that's being born, no problem. They can have that baby. But if they're giving birth to a boy, you need to kill that baby. Because we have to keep this population under control. And the midwives say, sure, no problem. Because that's what you say to the Pharaoh when he tells you something. You say, okay, yeah, sounds good, no problem. And then they went, no way. We're not going to do that. Okay, we're just not going to do that. And so the Hebrew nation keeps growing and growing. And finally, at some point, the Pharaoh says, ladies, to the midwives, what is the deal? What's going on? You're supposed to be killing the baby boys. And their response is, well, the Hebrew ladies, they're not like the Egyptian ladies. They're, how do you say, robust. They're pretty tough cookies. I think that's what it says in the Bible. So they're tough. And so when they send for the midwives for us to go and help them out, by the time we get there, they've already had the babies. And so we're sorry, but we can't help out. And so the Pharaoh says, okay, plan B then. We're going to kill all the baby boys. Any baby boys are to be thrown into the Nile River and drowned. And that's where we're going to pick up this story. In Exodus chapter 2, we find this story about Jochebed and Moses, beginning in verse 2. And she, Jochebed, became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. The first point that I want to share with you this morning is that loving mothers like Jochebed, like you, loving mothers protect their children. I thought it was interesting. I looked this passage up in several different Bible translations. And here's what I found. In this is the NIV version. You see that she saw that she had a fine child. But in some of these other versions, we read that he was a special baby, a beautiful child, an especially beautiful and healthy child. In one version, it even says that he was a goodly child. And another version, how wonderful, when she saw how wonderful the baby was. What mother doesn't look at their baby and see a fine child? They're special. And mothers look at babies in a way that only mothers can. They see them through a different set of eyes, I'm convinced. And when she saw that her baby was special, because it was hers, she needed to protect it. And protection comes in various forms. Moms understand what it means to protect a child physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally. Moms get it. They understand. And they protect. So loving mothers will protect their children, and that's what Jochebed did. She hid the baby for 3 months. She did her best. But the time came when she found that she couldn't provide all of the protection that she needed for her child. And so we read in Exodus chapter 2, verse 3, in the first half of verse 3, but when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him, and she coated it with tar and pitch. And so she found that she was trying her very best to protect her baby, but there was only so much she could do. And now we see that loving mothers make provisions for their children. They do whatever they can to provide the very best they can for their babies. Moms, this is the understatement of the day this morning. Moms give, and they give, and they give, and they give. That's what moms do. Loving moms put the needs of their children above their own, and they make sure that their children's needs are met. Jochebed did the very best she could to protect her baby, and then when she found she couldn't do that any longer, she made every provision she could to try something to give her child the very best care that he could have. And when Jochebed could no longer safely care for her son, and she did all that she could to provide for him, she entrusted her son to God. And that's the third point this morning, that loving mothers entrust their children to God. In Exodus chapter 2, verse 3, the second half, we read, then she placed the child in this basket, and she put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. And at some point, she took her hands off of that basket, and in doing so, she entrusted her son to the Lord. At this point, she had no choice but to let go and to let God. Loving moms have a desire in their hearts to be everything for their children. But wisdom is knowing that they must entrust their babies to God, because he will ultimately be everything that they need. That's what loving mothers do. That's what Jochebed did. But there are some other women in this story I'd like to point out. When the king of Egypt ordered that every Hebrew child be killed, Jochebed said, not on my watch. Nuh-uh. And so she hid her son for 3 months. And when the Hebrew midwives were told that they needed to kill the baby boys, they said, nuh-uh, not on my watch. In Exodus chapter 1, verse 17, we read these words. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do, and they let the boys live. They had a fear of Pharaoh, for sure. I'm sure they said to his face, yes, sir. They had a fear of God that was much greater. And finally, we see the nurturing nature of Pharaoh's own daughter. In Exodus chapter 2, verses 5 and 6, we read, when the Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile River to bathe with her servants, she saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent her female slave to get it. And she opened it and saw the baby, and he was crying. And she felt sorry for him. And so Pharaoh's daughter, upon finding this baby, said, not on my watch. No, I'm not going to take the life of this baby either. Because that's the nature of a woman. They have this nurturing part about them that I think us guys, we understand in kind of a pixelated, blurry version of what that is. And we understand it. We can make sense of that. But women, I think, see that with crystal clarity. They understand what it means to be a nurturer. It's in their heart. It's in their spirit. It's what they do. Now, I want to take a side note here, because I think there's kind of a sermon within a sermon. As I was reading this passage and studying it, something really profound, I think, jumped out at me. And it was this idea that Moses' salvation came in the very place where he was to find his death. Now, follow me. The Pharaoh's daughter from the royal house finds a Hebrew baby boy in the Nile River. The scene couldn't have been more perfectly set. All she had to do was let the baby drown. She didn't even have to take him anywhere. It's not like she found him over here and then, well, I guess if I want to follow this order from Dad, I have to take him all the way over there to the Nile River. She was already in the Nile River, and this was a Hebrew baby boy. All she had to do was overturn the basket, and it's done. But in the very place where Moses, was supposed to find his death, he found salvation. And isn't that just how God works sometimes? So, sermon within a sermon here. I want to encourage you this morning. I don't know what you might be going through, and you might be going through something heavy, something tragic, something that's really just hard to deal with right now, and you might be right in the middle of it, and you might think, this is the worst. This is just a difficult spot. And I want to encourage you to say, hang in there, because you'll find your salvation. Sometimes in the very ugly place where you think you just might find what feels like death. There was something nurturing about all of these women in this story. They wouldn't hurt this little baby boy. There's something awesome about women and about mothers and the way that they care for people, the way they care for their own biological children, the way they care for the children in the neighborhood, the way they care for the children of this church, the way they care for others that they might mentor and give leadership to. It's just in the heart of a woman. And I think that that's to be applauded. And finally, I want to share this verse with you, found in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 57 and 58. A word of encouragement. And it says, "But thanks be to God. He gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters and moms, let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." And I've been around long enough to know that you've had those days where you've said to yourself, is this even worth it? Am I making any difference? Am I serving any purpose? Have I done anything good in this world? You've come to the end of your rope, you've hit rock bottom, and you're ready to just throw your hands up and say, I give up. I've had enough, because what I do doesn't matter. But this Bible verse reminds us that when you dedicate your work to the Lord, it is not in vain. So I want you to be encouraged this morning. I don't know your story. I say this all the time. I don't know every person's story. I don't know what your day looked like today. I don't know what your week has looked like this week. Some of you I've not met, so I don't know anything about you. I don't know your story, and I don't know what you're going through, but I know that the Bible's true. And I know that the Bible says if you commit your work to the Lord, your work is not in vain. And so I want to encourage you to tap into that mother's spirit and that whole list of qualities that I mentioned about that women have, most of them being under that umbrella of being a nurturing mom. Keep up the good work, because this world needs you in a way that guys can't provide. There's a day for that. We'll talk about that on Father's Day. Rick will talk about it, not me. But this world needs godly women to raise up the next generation in a way that only women can. So I encourage you this morning to keep up the good work. Keep doing what God has called you to do. And we'll give God all the glory and all the praise for it. It's become a tradition here that we close Mother's Day and our Father's Day services by singing a song called, I just lost it, the Family Prayer Song. And in that family prayer song are these lyrics. As for me and my house, it's just the scriptures set to a musical tune. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I want to encourage you to be faithful to do that. There will be good times. There will be times of celebration. There will be times that you love your life. And there will be times that are struggle and you want to give up. But in the high points and the low points, we can make a commitment, just like we do in our marriages. We can make a commitment and say, as for me and my house, good times or bad times, we will serve the Lord. Let's stand and let's sing that together.